We're just embarking upon teaching on the three principal aspects of the path, and it's one of the shortest texts, and so it packs a punch, concise, pithy, and really, I think, provides a framework from which to make good use of all of our practices. So many times we have lots of practices, and we have lots of things we do, and a question came up in our morning group, like, what should I be doing? I have this and I have that, and we're going through like all 7 points of mind training, and I haven't quite realized this, but we're studying that, and so it can be pretty easy to get lost, or kind of wonder what is it I should be doing. And so one of the ways to approach this path, and I think a real valuable way, is to gain an overview, a perspective, and have a map, a little road map that kind of says, oh, this goes here and that goes here. And I know where it goes in that map. And then, even if I'm here studying, I can be planting the seeds, kind of gain a view of things. But this is where I'm putting my primary focus. And I'm, holding lightly, planting seeds on the rest of the path. I get to engage in some activities that I'm not quite ripe yet for my own mind. And I think this is one of the most skillful aspects of Buddhism, is when he starts the teachings on the Eightfold Path, he starts with wisdom, which is where we end. You go, well, wait a minute, how am I starting with what I'm going to end? And the reason is, if we don't understand the structure, the nature of things, we're not going to be able to proceed on the path. We're going to just create a big mess. I don't know, I'm creating the karma for this. So understanding cause and effect, understanding sort of the landscape, the nature of our existence, having a conceptual framework for that's really helpful. So that now I know what to do. And then ultimately, by doing these things within this construct, I'll get the realization. But I have to know what the map is. I need to understand the language. So with that in mind, this teaching, the three principal aspects of the path, the Je Tsongkhapa, it's where just, and he's written volumes. It just comes right down to these are these three essential elements. And everything that we do can be cultivating these. And they're not independent, they're very much intertwined. And so I find things like this framework that's just been really helpful for me. We had a talk the other day on the 5 powers, synthesis of practice for a single lifetime, which is really this way of bringing all your practices into your daily life. It's a method, and it's very helpful in that sense. So here, unpacking and understanding what are these essential elements for the path of awakening, then I might find that I can be working on these when I'm taking out the trash. I might be working on these when I'm having a conversation I don't want to have. I could be working on these, when I'm making time for my child. That Dharma is not some faraway thing. It's always an opportunity to be developing these aspects of our path. So we had a really good talk, a good foundation that led to our teaching on this text, given a good context. So we'll dive in here. And by the way, 3 principal aspects are renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom. And here he took, just this whole path, and he put them in these pithy verses. And so with a text and a teaching like this, and there's always a starting with I prostrate to my ennobling, impeccable lamas, and honoring of the lamas and the teachings and the lineage and really holding it in high regard that, this is not something made up. This is um, an expression of these teachings that have a pure lineage, and all those that maintained it, and all those that realized it, and all those that continue to make these teachings available to us. So a prostration to my noble and impeccable lamas. This is a short text, but usually then they'll say any mistakes here are mine, not the lamas, not the Buddhas, just mine. I'll do my best. And so that's implied here. In the first verse, I shall try to explain to the best of my ability the essential meaning of the scriptural pronouncements of the triumphant ones. And this first verse here, the triumphant ones, is a reference to renunciation in this particular sentence. The path praised by the triumphant's holy offspring, and that would be the bodhisattvas, the Bodhicitta reference here. The fording passage for the fortunate desiring liberation. And this really talks about wisdom, liberation. And so right here in this very first piece where I'm going to try to explain, he's really coming into these three pieces: renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom. This is what I'm going to try to explain. Second verse, listen with a clear mind, O fortunate one, whose mind would rely on the path pleasing the triumphant. Through being unattached to the pleasures of compulsive existence and eager to make meaningful your life of respites and enriching factors. So here, this first, listen with a clear mind, O fortunate one, whose mind would rely on the path pleasing to the triumphant. And in there is implicita. What's a path pleasing to the triumphant? That path is one that is unmistaken and complete. Unmistaken and complete. And that's something to investigate. And we talked a bit about that last week, is how do we get here? What drives us here? How did we come to a place where we have access to the Dharma and the path and a fortunate rebirth? And that's through a lot of struggle, a lot of mistakes. And at some point, we have had the opportunity to meet with teachings that can alleviate suffering. And some of those teachings may not have been very complete, some not so accurate, but they got us here. And in my own life, I think about my journey. And there are teachers that have helped me in my life that I wouldn't follow today. But at that moment, they got me to that next level. And I think that's important to remember, that in our journey, in our quest to find a path, in our quest to learn how to be okay, we're going to make some mistakes. We're going to get pretty excited about certain things. We may indulge in a lot of things, and we may, think of what we thought when we were 18, This is the way of the world. Let me tell you how it is. And then we ripen. And so one thing to understand, I think, is really helpful, because people get very caught up, because here we're using precise words, unmistaken and complete. And then the view might be, well, I have the right path and others don't. Yeah. Which I might have said when I was 22 also. And that was a very different path. And to understand that these teachings come in many forms to touch many mind streams, and often show up in ways that maybe aren't very right for me, but are for others. And so, in my own life, I like to reflect on some of the crazy things I used to believe, and endeavor to achieve. And fortunately, those things did lead me to a teacher that I was ripe and the path was there. And I found a path for me that was very suitable. And the karma ripened very quickly. And but the journey to get there was one in which I had to explore, I had to learn, and some of the teachers that I found, or role models even for that matter, while I may not aspire to have such role models today, they still got me somewhere. And so was that really a Buddha showing up in a particular way at a particular time for a mind stream? So that's very important to understand, I think, as we approach this, that the people that we judge and label and perceive in a particular way, there are teachers as well. There are teachers as well. And we're bringing something to that table. And maybe we don't like all our lessons, but we're having an opportunity. And so it is putting these two words that could be a bit loaded: unmistaken and complete. And then, well, what's that mean then? And can we have an unmistaken path? Can we have teachings that lead without error, without mistake, for awakening? And even though some teachings can look very different, right, and not be in conflict. And so we have in just Buddhism, we've got our Theravadan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana, our paths. We have within Tibetan Buddhism, the Gelugpas, and we have our Dzogchen and Mahamudra, and we have these yogis who do very different things than, in the scholarly Gelugpa traditions. And can they all be unmistaken? And what would that be like? And so here we have to start to really look at is, do they reduce our mental afflictions? Do they cut through the confusion that is creating my suffering? That would be helpful, but not necessarily unmistaken. And there, I think, is something to pay attention to. Unmistaken and complete. Unmistaken and complete. So unmistaken could be that I misunderstand a teaching, even though the teaching's not unmistaken. And I think here in the West, this is something to pay attention to. More so because there's a blending of some of the Buddhist teachings with psychology and with other things, and so there's this mixture of what this is and that is, and how we define things. And so I think in some of those contexts, teachings, if we call it Buddhist philosophy, I don't think it would be so unmistaken. Call it a Buddhist path, then that might be mistaken. Does the Buddhist path lead to complete liberation and freedom of all mental afflictions? That's a Buddhist path. Can we reduce our mental and emotional suffering in human form and have less suffering and samsara? Yeah, I think we could do that too, and it's helpful. But won't maybe achieve liberation. And so these are things I think when we engage in this, what is the path that I'm on? What's my goal? it would not be unmistaken to have a goal, if your goal was to make samsara as pleasant as possible. I can suffer a lot less than samsara. I can decorate it pretty well. I can not get so attached to things. I can not exaggerate so much. And there's a lot of things I can do. But it would be mistaken to think that I can do some of those things, but achieve complete liberation. So, unmistaken. Things are unmistaken in the sense that they're teaching something that can't work. Unmistaken, and I'm doing something that's not going to get me the result that I'd like. Unmistaken, sometimes I don't understand what was taught. So a very common mistaken view is that the source of our suffering is desire, right? And we hear that, but it's a technical term, right? It's a confused desire. It's a desire born of misperception, misunderstanding, and confusion. And so these teachings that are here have been passed down from lamas and the Buddhas and these beings that have really achieved and found liberation in this transmission. And so understanding these pith instructions become pretty essential if I am really suited and desirous of a complete liberation, in which case I'm going to need some desire to get better. I'm going to have some desire to cultivate compassion. I'm going to have some desire to free myself and others from suffering. But that desire can be infused with bodhicitta and an understanding of the nature of this interdependence, and that desire can be born of wisdom, even in some of my confusion. And so having a teacher and a path, and we're so fortunate today. I mean, you can pull up. I mean, I've got this text, this translation from Alexander Berzin online. I mean, just phenomenal. I mean, how can you have access to someone who can unpack these teachings just so well? His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we can pull up on YouTube. We have these, but we also have the potential to really engage in some things that make us feel good, and maybe don't get us as far on that path. And so, with the mixture of things, with sometimes, we were talking about that the other night. This term Dharma light, or the real thing, right? Coca-Cola is the real thing, right? Was that the thing? Or Dharma light? It was the real thing. It was Coca-Cola, pretty sure. Thank you. I got verification. I didn't want to be mistaken. We have a quorum. Yeah, we have a quorum. The real thing. And so, and his his warning that if we just engage in reducing this or that, but still clinging to samsara and only picking the pieces that are ripe to, it could potentially reduce some suffering, but it's not going to get us awakening. And so I like to just bring that, just I don't think there's I think it's helpful that people find ways to reduce suffering. I think it's great that there's Western psychology is finally catching up with some of these things. They're learning about neural pathways. They're learning about, the neuroplasticity, the understanding even how genes get expressed, and that can be dialed down enough that this thing is very malleable and dynamic. And so now in the field of therapy and counseling, there's a much greater understanding of if I change my thoughts, I'll change my emotions. Cognitive behavioral therapy, I can challenge thoughts that are not accurate. It's very rudimentary Buddhism, but it's cutting edge psychology today, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's helping a lot of people. And so I think that's awesome.
What's the difference between CBT and DBT?
Dialectical behavioral therapy. Yeah, so dialectical behavioral therapy is not just the thoughts, it's a much wider range of experience, which includes mindfulness and meditation and saturating certain experiences of pleasurable experience. It's a full, it's a really good methodology, richer even than the cognitive behavioral therapy. And so these are great things because there's all kinds of humans on this planet, and there's a lot of people who are not Buddhists that can still get enlightened, So, we don't, again, the right way. We have a path, but our mind streams have met with this path, and there is a demonstrated lineage of people on that path who achieve enlightenment. So, that's helpful. But Tenzin Palmo, Jetsuya Tenzin Palmo, I really, she's so spot on, I think, so many times. At the time of death, what we're going to meet is our mind. That's what we're going to meet. And so if we start to understand, and that's again why it's so important to understand the dynamics here, that everything I think, say, or do is like a tape recording. My karma, my imprints, the habits, the tendencies, the more I do them, that just becomes the way I am. And there's nothing magical about that. But also the attitudes, the thoughts, the labels I stick on people. Well, those become automatic. I don't even need to stick labels on people. You show me somebody, they have stash hats now. You know what stash hats are? I learned that yesterday. Anybody know what stash hats? You do. Yeah. I'm so out of it. I used to know stuff, but I don't anymore. But I know what a stash hat is now. And but you see someone wearing a stash hat, you might be holding, something that would be mind altering. There's a little symbol on the hat. And, but I can judge that person now, right? And so it's like I stick a label and there's that kind of person, And, but that's with a hat. Could be with a bumper sticker. Could be with, what those people are.
You know, your compassion hoodies.
That's right. Well, that's our gang, man. That's right. Way of Compassion hoodies, man. Got our hoodies on, cruising through town. That's how we roll. There's a few of us who can judge us like that. And but we stick a label, and then we just fill it all in. We don't even have to try, right? We just don't even have to try. I know what a Republican's like. I know what the Democrats like. I know what. We just fill it in, and we actually believe that person is that way, or these people are like that, or it's funny because the person wearing the stash hat was in recovery, and he doesn't hold anything like that. He just liked the hat. Or so he said. And so if we start to understand this dynamic that I'm creating a lot of how I'm experiencing the world, there's no objective quantifiable world out there. There's an interaction that's constantly arising in dependence upon what I'm bringing to it and what's arising and how I see things and how I experience things. But fundamentally, I'm the one generating either wholesome or unwholesome. I'm either coming from a motivation of anger, resentment, grasping, desire, or renunciation, compassion, loving kindness. And if these motivations are prominent of renunciation, compassion, loving kindness, harmlessness, ill will, harmlessness, and goodwill, then we're good. It changes everything. And that's why it's so important to understand the dynamics. That what am I bringing to it? Something's happening. I'm having an experience that's unpleasant. The unpleasant isn't in the experience, it's in the interaction of what I'm bringing and what's happening. And now I have an opportunity to create a karma for more pleasant experience that can grow. So every event here becomes an opportunity then to transform into a path of awakening. If I understand that, wow, life's a little bit different, and I'm already suffering less. There's a path there. And so tying it back to we meet the nature of our mind. So if I'm going through with a Buddhist perspective and this interdependence, at the time of death, I'll probably have a bit of a different experience than if I'm Catholic and I'm going to church, and because I might be talking to Peter at the pearly gates. The contents of my mind. I've been creating an experience and a karma and a conditioning around certain things, and I have a certain expectation at the time of death in a particular way, and that karma can ripen. Somebody raise their hand here. Too many people for me to see. Okay. And bear in mind, those of you online, if you would like to talk, just shoot up a hand or a chat message. So we meet and that's this description at the time of death then is, what have we been watering? That's why it's so important to be mindful of the attitudes and thoughts and literally beliefs that I permeate throughout my life. I have the chance right now to change that in the future. It's delayed, it's what makes it difficult. I mean, I'm told that if I don't eat all that popcorn, I'd be healthier, but it's hard to imagine. I want to feel good now. And so, but understand this and then applying some wisdom to understanding this experience, then I can start noticing where does my suffering come from, right? Where does my emotional angst come from? What's going on? And if I look deeply, it's not the event so much. It's if only, if only things would have been different. If only things turn out this way. If only, and it's this mind that is unsatisfied in a current moment where I'm healthy and okay. And there is no problem other than my mind thinking if only things were different than they are. How much is that our suffering? Or if things don't turn out the way I'd like, I worry about it. All of that's mental activity. And so in here, we want to, when we think about unmistaken, let's not mistake the real source of my suffering nor the real source of my happiness. Because it's not out there. Can't be. Those are mental and emotional states. Out there can be the conditions that trigger and give rise to happiness or suffering, but not the actual cause. And so unmistaken in identifying the source of my mental and emotional suffering and the source of my joy, inner peace, and well-being. And is it unmistaken that the more that my motivations come from renunciation, this is right view, by the way, within the Eightfold Noble Path, the right view is, or right motivation, right motivation. Renunciation, what translates as compassion, loving kindness, harmlessness, and goodwill. Which is pretty cool because you only need 3 things. Everything that doesn't matter. The action doesn't matter after that. It's just really hard to always have those three things be your motivation, because my mind's not here most of the time, and then when it is there, it's not always checking that. But we can start checking that. We can start testing, is this mistaken or unmistaken? If I engage in actions motivated by my self-centeredness, my confusion, my attachment, my aversion, will that get me the lasting happiness I seek? If I start engaging in actions out of renunciation, and renunciation we haven't quite got to yet, it could happen, it really could happen when you get to renunciation. What we're renouncing is delusion of this non-changing self, that's driving everything. So if I can be motivated by an understanding of the interdependent nature of my experience with others and things, and have a motivation of compassion or loving kindness in my interactions, will I experience more well-being? And we can test that. So, but to even test that, we want to start with, where's the real source of my suffering? We've had so much in our lives. What's the cause? Have we had the same thing happen to us in different occasions, have different experiences? And so from a Buddhist perspective, the cause is going to be within my own mind stream. The conditions will be the environment. So the seeds here, everything else is the water and the nutrients and the sun and all that. Anger comes, but anger's here, not there. And so if I understand that framework, I can be able to work with that. And then a complete path leads to liberation. So what he's saying here is, whose mind would rely upon a path pleasing to the triumphant. So here we are with this unmistaken and complete path, a path of liberation, and unmistaken in the teachings of the nature of our prison and the cessation of that prison, unmistaken in clarity around the Four Noble Truths. So listen with a clear mind, O fortunate one, whose mind would rely upon a path pleasing to the triumphant. So I'm going to pause there just to see any questions online or any comments or thoughts here. There's usually a little delay in that, but big group here. Okay, we go to the next sentence. It's still within the third verse, or second verse actually. Through being unattached to the pleasures of compulsive existence and eager to make meaningful your life of respites and enriching factors. And we're going to rely upon this path, and we're going to be unattached to the pleasures of compulsive existence, eager to make meaningful our life of respites and enriching factors. So the respites and enriching factors is the rare and precious human rebirth, these 18 qualities. The the pleasures of compulsive existence. Back to the popcorn. That's challenging. And so that's why it's so important to start to understand the nature of the cause of my well-being and the nature of my suffering. And my mind is going to want to feel good. I'm going to want to feel good, whether it's something I eat, whether it's something I do, whether it's something I distract myself from. And so this compulsive existence, and by compulsive, I'm compelled. I don't even have a choice. I just don't. Smell of popcorn. I got hungry. I wasn't hungry before. If you're at home, you might be getting hungry, just be talking about popcorn. So compulsive compels. We try to change habits, but we can't, because I'll start that diet tomorrow. Our habits very compulsive, things that we seek, and then we're compulsive in ways that are just so subtle. Can't sit at home quietly. Got to turn on the news. Got to turn on some music. Got to do need something to distract my mind, to keep it busy. But I'd really like a peaceful mind. But I'm not giving my mind time to be peaceful. Compulsively trying to improve my situation, the environment. Which wall hanging should we have? And what else can we do? And what would make me feel better next? So the step is starting to lessen the attachment to the pleasures of compulsive existence, because it's pleasurable, right?
I think I'm getting impulsive and compulsive mixed up. Are they similar to be impulsive?
So impulsive, you have an impulse. Compulsive, you kind of have to do it almost. So you can have an impulse and not have to act on it. Compulsive is there's an implication you can't really stop, compulsively eating. Whereas I can have an impulse for something, which I may or may not act on it. But some people are impulsive, they don't check themselves, but they may not be as imprisoned by that. Yeah, when you're compelled to do something, you're doing it even against your will sometimes, right? Like, I really was going to do that diet today. I'm not. Yeah, compulsive. Like, you don't really have much choice. My wife often calls me impulsive.
They say this is the impulse bisection, right? So that's where I'm getting it from, like that little section before you check out. So you're gonna make an impulse purchase because it just happens to be there, and you're like,
right.
You ever heard that term, like impulsive purchases?
I've heard of impulse, and I know there's a whole psychology to how they decorate a store, right, to get you to buy this or that. So you're talking about the impulse, like right at the checkout, right? We're going to do it, impulse, do it. But there's also a lot of times where you wouldn't do it, right?
That's where they have the Snickers bars that are the king size ones. Good working.
Well, those are healthy, though.
Okay,
They got nougat and nuts in them. Yeah.
Everybody knows nougat.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Survival skills. They throw those in the pack.
You can make an energy bar.
Do they?
Well, they used to.
Okay. Didn't pan out. So we're already in our hour. So let me just touch here. So this is really laying the groundwork of how fortunate we are that we have this path. It's unmistaken. It's complete. And the way to engage in it is to start letting go of the actual cause of our suffering, which is the attachment to pleasurable compulsive experiences. And that's, I just always relate it to, because I'm a grandfather now, delayed gratification for kids, like I'm trying to teach them. I can't do it, but I really think they ought to get delayed gratification. Me, not so much. How often, do I procrastinate? How often do I do something and I think, well, you know, read a Dharma book, you know, watch a Netflix series. You mentioned Netflix earlier, right? So do this, do that, and because I want to feel good. And so much of our time can be not very productive if I go to a retreat and I meditate and I purify, and then on my way home, I'm already grasping at, you know, anger, resentment, and so forth, and my life returns back to the chaos. So then I need a retreat. So I go up here to a retreat, and then, you know, it goes back. So the idea then is that it's not something I go do on the side. It's something I start applying, start realizing. You know, I'll feel much better about myself if I don't engage in this activity. I'll feel good about myself tomorrow. And really creating a discipline, and that's where meditation is going to give that opportunity to start really, because the pleasure is not happiness. That's the confusion here, right? A stimulus-driven pleasure does not provide happiness. It provides a stimulus-driven pleasure which could hijack the rest of your life, which is why we have people ODing right now. A pleasurable experience, pleasure, the sensation, is not happiness. As a matter of fact, it's often very far from peaceful. Your nervous system would break down. Your genuine happiness and well-being is a natural state that's already present. You don't even have to do anything for it. It's blissful. It's right there. And we feel it from time to time, but we're not caught up in all that. It feels pretty good. I don't have to do anything. And so that's a confusion, and in the desire to get those pleasures, which includes things like pride and some other things that, you know, could work in our against us, ego and all that, is we want to let go of those because they're actually creating samsara. They're creating my prison. And I want to start undoing my prison. I want to start undoing that. So that's why it says, through being unattached to the pleasures of compulsive existence, I'm going to stop creating this prison, and I'm going to make meaningful this life, a rare and precious human rebirth with all of the facets of liberation available. I'm going to seize this. I'm going to take advantage of that. So that's where we're at here, this second verse. Is really laying the groundwork that I now recognize the source of my suffering. I have a path that is unmistaken and complete. I'm going to take advantage of it. Now let's now dedicate what a rare and precious opportunity. How few beings have a chance to sit with the Dharma, the path of awakening, and unmistaken and complete path. Let's dedicate our time together, this incredible opportunity. Can we dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings? May all sentient beings be free of suffering, find their liberation. May we be able to use the merited wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to help us recognize our own Buddha nature, to achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. And may we also dedicate the merited wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes for the long life of all the spiritual teachers of all spiritual traditions that are authentically teaching a path of awakening. May they live long, may their teachings flourish.